Evangelical Christians have always been interested in reaching Muslims with the gospel, and unfortunately, worldwide events of the last decade have really intensified interest in the Islamic world. And so the question is, what is the best way to reach a Muslim with the gospel message? And I'm joined by Abdu Murray today to help me answer that question. Abdu, you are the president and co-founder of a ministry called Embrace the Truth International. It's an organization devoted to reaching out to non-Christians with the truth of the gospel message. You also are an adjunct speaker for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. You have a BA in psychology from the University of Michigan, as well as a doctor of jurisprudence from the University of Michigan Law School. And so I understand that you grew up as a Muslim and in fact were a bit of a Muslim apologist as a young man. So tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up as a Muslim, and then you converted to Christianity. Tell me a little bit about that as well.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. And I grew up in America, actually, in a largely white, at the time, very sort of homogenous neighborhood. Now it's very diverse, but we were sort of exotic. This is way pre-9/11, and we were sort of this exotic commodity, like, oh, look at the cute Muslims running around. We want to learn more about those people. And I took that as a way in which I could begin to discuss my Islamic convictions with the Christians around me, with anybody really. It didn't matter if you were a Christian or not. And I began to actually just share my convictions, because I was very serious about Islam. I had this view that people should believe true things and not false things, and I thought Islam was true and everything else was false. So I began to talk about the truth of Islam to people who weren't Muslims. Most of them were Christians, or at least nominally Christians, and I began by asking them a very important question, and that question was, why are you a Christian? And for the most part, the answers were, well, I was raised that way. And I have a follow-up question. If you're trusting your eternal soul to a tradition, is that a good enough reason to believe something because somebody else does? And oftentimes their eyes would get wide and they'd want to know, okay, well, maybe I was believing a lie. And I'd say, well, here's why I think you were. And I would begin to challenge Christianity. And as I was creating that vacuum by knocking the faith out of very sort of nominal people when it comes to their faith, I would bring in Islam and try to make that the substitute and say, this is why I think Islam is true. And I was pretty good at it, actually. We had some people who began to really study or at least want to learn more about Islam. And along the way, I was running into Christians, precious few, unfortunately, but a few Christians who knew what they were talking about and why they believed what they believed. And they began to get me on a journey towards taking this a little more seriously. Maybe thinking, maybe this is worth thinking about. And over the course of 9 years, from when that journey began to when it was finally completed, when I was 27 years old, I gave my life to Christ after seeing the enormity of the evidence, the not only historical, some of the scientific evidence as well, but the scriptural evidence and the philosophical reasons I should become a Christian, and really, when it came down to it, even the existential reasons, that it gave purpose and passion and meaning to my life in a way that no other system of belief could possibly do. That which I wanted to be true about the world was actually made true in the gospel.
And we're going to explore in future episodes a little bit more details about what you found compelling about the evidence for the Christian faith, and what raised some questions perhaps in your mind about the truth of Islam. But I want to ask another question more on the personal level. I grew up in a Muslim home as well. My father was a Muslim, my mom wasn't. And people always ask me what was my father's reaction when I converted to Christianity. I converted when I was 23 years old. And so I'm going to ask you that question, since I get asked that question all the time. So what was your family's reaction when you became a Christian?
Well, you can imagine, you don't have to imagine, you know very much, but I think when you have something like this happen, a complete worldview shift. First, there was the personal cost to me. What was I changing and giving up personally? And then, of course, there's a communal aspect to it. There's family, there's community, there's all these things. It wasn't welcome news. You can imagine what would that be like. I mean, if anybody's watching this who's a Christian, just think about what it would be like if you told your father or your mother that you're no longer a Christian and you were raised in a devoted Christian family. Everything turns upside down at that point. So the emotional upheaval was great, but we have worked things out. We're close. and we're striving to make ourselves even closer as a family. But it wasn't pretty, and it wasn't easy at all. But I can tell you, it is worth it.
Well, people, again, I don't think appreciate the cost of conversion for a Muslim, particularly in the West. It's not only in the Middle East, but even in the West. And so I'd really like to explore more of the reasons why there is that cost associated with conversion for a Muslim in the next episode.
Sure, love to.